Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Nancy.
So let's talk about credentials and access permissions in Luna today.
Okay, that sounds good. So, in order to talk about that, I'll have you go to the administrator.
Okay. And
Okay, so now that we're here, what is it that you're trying to achieve
okay,
today?
so um, I have an audience, my Historic Preservation Committee. And so I've done a little bit of work ahead of time, and I just really need to make sure I'm doing it correctly. So I created a credential called the Historic Preservation Committee, which I think of as the credential for my collection manager. But then I have an internal team and they have different roles. And then I occasionally have people that come in as sort of who need guest permissions. And then I
Okay,
know there's also a credential called this anonymous user credential. So I'm just trying to make sure I have everything sort of squared away perfectly. So if I go to my Historic Preservation Committee credential, I this is the credential that my collection builder will be using or my collection builders will be using, right? So and they've got there's certain permissions that I can assign to the credential um,
right,
to create and edit templates and create collections. And then
right. So, do you want to talk about those higher level permissions before you get to adding the access permission?
sure, yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay, so first of all, in a credential, when you're setting it up, you'll see that this screen has what we call higher level permissions, and they are at the instance level. So they're not collection specific. In other words, they are really allowing the user to either connect to different tools in Luna or to have a higher set of permissions in the overall Luna viewer. So at the top there, where it says the viewer and library settings, this is where you could check the box to allow for export of images. And that will allow this user with this credential to be able to export both images from the viewer and from the library just in general. Then we have the My Uploads. So you check the box if you want to allow for that. And My Uploads is just a way for an end user in the Luna viewer to be able to upload their own content, their own image files to the Luna viewer. They're not exposed to anybody else but themselves, but it allows them to work with those images in Luna with other institutional collection images. Then we have below that the allowed file extensions for uploading.
Ah,
And really, there's the default that we've set here, and they contain, JPEG, TIFF, um, movie files, so on, MP3 files, so on and so forth. But if there is one that's missing from what our default is, then you can simply add a semicolon
mhm.
to the last extension that you see, and then type in the extension that you would like to upload.
Okay, so I did just add HTML and it had that in memory, so that was kind of easy to do. So
Okay,
popped in there.
perfect.
So because I like adding HTML files now. Cool.
Yes, and that's
Okay.
a good one to put in there because
Hmm.
it's not a default.
Right.
So next, now we're going to set the collection manager settings. The collection manager, of course, is the tool where you're creating both collections and templates. And so we have three options for, first of all, the templates, and that is to create, to edit, or to delete a template. So you're going to set that at the instance level for a user. Then the next one is talking about collections, and we have the option to create or delete a collection here. Editing a collection is actually found in the access permission, and we'll talk a little bit more about access permissions in a different video, but for now we're just looking at the credential.
Okay.
The last credential that you set here will be the Luna Administrator. which is whether or not you want a user with this credential to be accessing the administrator tool, which is what we're in right now. The next box over is sharing. And so if you want the user to be able to work with our new sharing tool, then you would click that. If not, then you would just leave it unchecked. So once you've set all of your permissions here, go ahead and click Save. And then we can go on to the next part, which is adding access permissions.
Great. Okay. And then, so over here on the left tab at the top, I have my users. And
Yes.
so I have a user named Jack. And this particular user has been, if I edit this user, you can see that they've been assigned that Historic Preservation Committee credential, so I don't have to do it each time. Okay, so with my Historic Preservation Committee credential, if I want to assign another collection, so right now there are 2 collections assigned to this credential, but if I want to add another collection, I go to...
So, yeah, what you would do would be click on the Add Access Permission button.
Okay.
And then up at the top, you're going to select the collection that you want to add.
Okay. So if I want to add, multi-page documents in Luna, I can just add that and then access permission.
Right. Then you want to select the correct permission for that collection, which will be the one that you've either created or a default one that Luna generates, which you're looking at right here.
Okay, so if my team really isn't going to do anything to this collection, I could just go with something like general, but if I'm working in the collection, I need more access.
Right.
Okay, so if I just add that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if I wanted to edit the permission settings, I see that he is here under edit.
Correct. Yeah. So if you wanted to make changes to the actual access permission, then you could do it from there. And it will affect everybody who has that same access permission for that collection.
Okay. So I'm not going to change anything here. So I'm going to cancel. And that's taken me into this sort of access permission screen. So it took me away from my credential screen, which I wanted to go back to credentials because I think we should talk about what the anonymous permission is, anonymous user. I know if I go to the David Rumsey map collection, I don't log in, it says welcome anonymous. So can you talk to me about anonymous?
Sure. Yeah. So the anonymous user is there to allow you to create or to make collections public, where a user will not need an account to actually see the items in your collection. So any collection that you have that is for public display, that doesn't require a username and password, you would assign to this anonymous user credential here. Okay. And in Luna, the access permissions that you can choose from that are defaults, unless you wanted to customize your own, are the restricted or the general access permissions. And so those two do not have access to the other tools in Luna. And so it's really all about the user being able to only get to the Luna viewer.
All right. So if I want to switch that one up to general, I can do that. Or I guess that's not where I change it. So sorry.
Yeah, you have to go to the credentials. And one other thing to note is that you'll want to make sure that if you are assigning a collection or you're making changes, that you actually click on the credential of your choice. When you enter the credentials area, the first one that's going to be active is the anonymous user. So just be a little bit careful when you are adding new permissions that you're selecting the collection you actually want to be in, or I'm sorry, the credential that you actually want to be in.
Okay, and then just a couple of things that I was thinking about. because I can manage my users through Luna, but it's also possible to manage user authentication through a third-party system if someone has Shibboleth, something like that. But I still, the admins still create the credentials, right? And then the users are still assigned to the Luna credentials, but via the other third-party authentication.
Right, that's correct. You'll still need to create all the credentials and assign the access permissions to them. And then the authentication method of choice will then select the credential that you've told it to use every time you add a new user to the system.
Okay. And for creating a media group, all I need to do is to have a login, and then my user has permission to create media groups. And that's also true for private annotations. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as long as somebody has an account, they can create media groups, they can create presentations, and they can create their own annotations, although those will be private. And so every time a user logs in with their account, they will be able to see their annotations, whereas anybody else accessing that collection will not be able to see them.
Okay. For collection level annotations, then
collection level annotations, those are set in the access permission. Okay. And if you do check the box for that particular permission, then you will be making annotations that will be exposed to everybody that's accessing the collection in the Luna viewer.
Okay. Well, this sounds good. I know I'm not doing a whole lot of movement on the screen, but we've covered some good ground for the credentials and access permissions. Great. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.